Just give us 2 seconds. Yep.
Mine still doesn't have any sound.
So we are live streaming.
Okay, I hear that. Wayne, can you either not hear us or not?
We're all done now.
All done. Oh,
Yep.
awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Right. Let's get underway. So we will kick off with an opening karakia. Whakatakateho. Please feel free to join. Whakatakateho ki te uru, whakatakateho ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, te hei e Māori ora. Excellent. Okay, on to the agenda. We have a number of apologies today. So I have received apologies from Mayor Barry, Mayor Whānau, Deputy Mayor Sadler-Footer, and from Helmut Modlik. But in some of their stead, I've got Councillor Gabrielle Tupou from Hutt City and Rauri Faulkner from Ngāti Toa in attendance as alternates. So I will move that the apologies from Mayor Barry, Mayor Whānau, Deputy Mayor Sadler-Footer and Helmut Modlik be accepted and leave of absence granted. Will someone second that? Mayor Guppy. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Right. I understand from Kate that we don't have any public speakers. Is that just checking?
That's
That is
correct.
still the case? Excellent. Okay. I'll move on to the conflict of interest declarations. Does any member have any conflict of interest that they wish to raise before we proceed?
No.
There being none, we will move on to the Culture and Value for Money Improvement Plan. So I believe I've even seen them in the chat room, Pat Doherty, Nick Leggett and Erin Ganley here to speak to this item. So I'll obviously open it up for you guys to talk through the paper and the improvement plan that you've put in front of us, and then we'll open it up to questions. I do have to say that even though I printed the improvement plan out in A3, it is still quite difficult to read. Maybe, I don't know if there's a more user-friendly way we can present those in future that doesn't test my aging eyesight. But over to you, Pat, Nick and Erin.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks very much, Water Committee members. I will just briefly introduce and then hand over to Erin, but we've obviously had an adoption or endorsement by the committee back at the end of May, and we're only 3 weeks in. So while work has obviously begun on the improvement plan implementation, 3 weeks is not a huge amount of time, but I wonder if I could ask the Water Committee members to potentially engage a little bit with the strategic priorities that are outlined there that the board set at the end of last year, once we were in a review process and we'd obviously had the budgetary failure. The new board with the 3 new directors is going to have a strategy session prior to our board meeting next week. And I'm keen to get feedback around ensuring that those strategic priorities align with where the committee sees things. Ideally, it'd be quite good to get some endorsement of those or some suggestions if you don't think we are hitting the mark. But you will see that the implementation plan has been aligned with those end-based outcomes, and they are around obviously improving the company to the standard that delivers compliant and effective and value for money water services, but we are of course looking for that end date and handing over high quality systems, people and processes to the new water organisation. So I would invite high level governance to governance feedback on those, and then perhaps if Erin could talk, give you a brief about the implementation plan.
Does anyone want to share their thoughts on those strategic outcomes? I have to say, I found the first one, Wellington Water is a strong and capable organisation. That gave me a bit of a chuckle because it just reminded me of something you might put on your vision board. I am strong and capable, and
Well,
I will have a good
it's
day
what we're
today.
aiming. It's what we're aiming for.
Yeah, that one sort of it didn't entirely resonate with me, although I knew the point that you were trying to get across.
You don't think we should be strong and capable?
Oh no, I do think you should be strong and capable. It's just having to say it like that, sort of. Yeah. What are other people's thoughts? Margaret?
Firstly, Nick, I think it provides a very clear steer as to what the priority areas for Wellington Water are, and I think that's important. One thing I would like to encourage the team to do is when we're talking about, if I see a document that's headed culture and values, I want to see something in there that's not necessarily functionally based, like reliability, strong organisation, water to people. I want to see things also in there that are related to how we behave, how we look at water, the way we do things, etc. And because that culture and value stuff, to me, that art form, rather than the functional and technical competence and capability, is where the richness in the kind of culture and values sits. And so I kind of take the default setting that everyone who's with Wellington Water, whether it's governance, engineer, whatever, are technically competent at what they do. They are very good at what they do. I think what's missing here is so what difference does the direction moving forward look like with regards to things like unpacking a little bit what te mana o te wai could mean for us as an organisation, looking at things like values of manaakitanga or whatever, and what that means. So I think it's a very good functional steer on the priorities that Wellington Water rightfully should have. I think what's missing for me is just a little bit of a pointer towards the how rather than the what. And so, yeah, that's my only bit of feedback, Nick, at a high level. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, kia ora, Ra, it does actually. And I think what we've done here is those are end-based goals, and the how is actually contained in the improvement plan. And you'll see there is, the title is Culture and Value for Money Improvement. And so I think these are where we try to end up to. And then the how is actually what we're doing in the specifics of the plan. And I mean, I'd invite your comment on what you see so far. I mean, we're not a long way along, I know, but in terms of, as you say, behaviours, values, those are things that Wellington Water lean quite heavily into, arguably without some success, but they very much remain our focus as we try and improve on the day-to-day.
Yeah, I think it's particularly that word strong that that I have a bit of an allergic reaction to, and I think trusted probably rings more true to me than strong. I don't really know what strong means in the context of an organisation. Mayor Baker?
Thank you. I'm happy with most of these goals. I agree with what Raz said. And the fact that we've got in there the demonstrating value for money. I mean, that's always a tough one. I'm a little annoyed we're having a separate meeting that was caused Wellington City Council wanted these extra meetings thrown in and no one turns up. So I'm a little bit annoyed that we're sitting discussing one paper and they're not here to feed into it. So I'm happy with the direction and everything that's written here. And it's just a matter of making it ready for handover. So thank you.
Excellent. Does anyone else have any comments they want to make around the strategic priorities before we move on to Erin talking about the improvement plan? Okay,
I think it's just important to note, Nick, before you disappear, that there's been a real improvement in kind of shining light on the things that really matter, and I think we should mention that needs to be mentioned, that as we navigate our way along this journey, and kind of supporting what Mayor Baker said as well, there's some really good visibility on stuff that matters here, and so I just wanted to compliment you and the team for shining a light on this stuff, because if we keep it in the dark, nothing ever changes. So, yeah.
Kia ora. Thank you. Thank you for that feedback.
Madam Chair,
yes.
kia ora tātou. I think what sort of, in hearing the various comments is, the word that comes to mind is kaitiakitanga stewardship. And so we have here, Nick, some of these areas of stewardship, be it in compliance, regulatory, capability, and financial stewardship. So I absolutely believe, Madam Chair, I think you would share the same view in a values approach, and a principled approach. And that's just my whakaaro on those sort of 4 areas. Kia ora.
I do also think, so there's been a couple of comments saying that they're quite technically focused, and that we want to ensure our values still come through as an organisation. I guess just in terms of the improvement plan, I do quite like the fact that they're fairly simple in terms of knowing what improvement goals we want to see against each of those strategic priorities. So I think a challenge for you, Nick, and the team is balancing those more value-based statements without kind of confusing the improvement plan and making it more obtuse and hard to see what the goals are aiming for.
Look, I thank you. I think this is good feedback. Wellington Water, I think in some areas has operated too much in the grey. And so these are very deliberately not in that zone. But how we do that, the values that we bring, stewardship, guardianship, those have to be evident in everything we do. And I'll talk to the board. We'll have this discussion next week to think if there's a way that we can overlay those at a higher level. But the reason this looks stark, and it's about thinking about that end date, is because we've got a lot to do by that date, and there's been poor performance. So we want it to be clear, and you want it to be clear too. So and that's really the explanation for that. But I do take on board the kōrero, and we will have a discussion about that. Thank you.
So Erin, are you online and ready to talk through? Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, if I could just add in some comments as well. Kara puketapu. Yeah, sorry, Councillor. Sorry, Ros. Just before Erin pops in, look, I quite like what we've got in front of us. I think the main questions that sort of I have as a governor in this is, and obviously yourself, Nick, and your board will need to sort of start thinking about, is how do these actions, I guess within the improvement plan itself, build public trust and resilience, and recognizing that we need to transition to this new entity. So those are all the sort of the questions that are going through my head around it. So at the moment, because you've only sort of just started, you don't have the metrics yet, you don't have the numbers. How much dollars have you actually saved? Where is the survey input from staff around culture and all that sort of stuff? It's not there yet. We're still building those sorts of things, so it's unreasonable for us to ask those questions. But as we transition, those will sort of be the key questions that'll be on our minds as governors, as well as you and your board. And then I guess what I would like to hear from you as we sort of go through this process is clarity around those triggers to us and signals to us to trigger an adjustment in direction, a pivot or a move, and saying, hey, things are trending in this way, committee. This is what we were, this is where we were at. Shit has happened or something positive has happened. Things go in both ways, and we need to adjust, and we need to move, we need to step in, or we need to do. So those are the things that I'm wanting from you. And I think generally where this improvement plan has got to is going in the right direction, and it'll be more fulsome as the work starts to step starts to be actioned.
Thank you, Kata. That is helpful too. And you're right. I mean, there's much water to go under the bridge in terms of, but you're right. And actually, I think it's worth stating here. I think you're right. Things can go in either direction. I think the anecdotal sense, not just of myself, but of people actually in the business, is that things are improving. And we've got, there are several indicators of that, as I say, anecdotal rather than provable evidence at this stage. But it's really important that we come back to you with those as we go and adjust our settings, trim the sails, or do whatever we need to do to ensure that we're still going in the direction that the committee and communities expect.
Awesome. Yep.
Kia ora.
100% with you.
Any other comments before we move on to the Appendix 1? Okay. There being none, Erin, do you want to talk us through the appendix and the actions you've taken over the last couple of weeks?
Good morning. Thank you, through you, Chair. As Nick noted, we had this signed off sort of 3 weeks ago. I think for me, the key thing is the heavy lifting really comes in the next 12 months of the plan. And you'll see that in the actions in the plan. But I would just like to acknowledge we've made, this is enabled by the significant changes that we've already made in the organisation to date, and we've talked to you about those. And so we are in a much better position and set up to move forward in line with what we've just been talking about. So some of the key highlights for the quarter, and you'll see in the plan, the Technology Systems Improvement Program. This is a key linchpin in the improvement overall of the organisation. Has been, we well articulated the challenges in that space. We've had some key milestones of our information management system is now out for request for proposal into the market. We've also brought forward and reorientated the wider system improvement request for proposal to ensure that we are delivering on that. So, that is a huge shift and a huge improvement area for the organisation. We've really driven that competitive tension into the tenders and into our consultant engagements, and we've changed contracts, and all tenders have been competitively tendered, or there has been competitive tension, and that will be ongoing as we drive for that value for money. You'll see also we've developed a very strong alliance, the Operation and Maintenance Alliance performance metrics and reporting. And so that will go live next week formally. And this will also be made public. And just to also note that this is now part of the draft determination from the Commerce Commission on the disclosure requirements. So they are also looking in on these things. Accountability is much stronger across the organisation through the restructure, and now driven down into the groups through very strong group purpose statements in our business planning. So we're really driving through into those outcomes as we were just talking to, and then on a group and team level on how we deliver against those outcomes and track those, and this improvement plan being driven into those group purpose and those. So that's a very strong change for the organisation, which, we talk to, what are the metrics, what are the improvements, so that will help us drive through some of those metric changes. I think one of the key areas is, and we're leaning in on very strongly, is around the staff engagement, and the uplift in staff engagement with the organisation, but moving really away from that learned helplessness that we've had historically. We've been discussing a concept, something around the lines of learned agility, so changing people's mindsets on how they think about things, and also empowering people to speak up, to understand where they have the power or where they need to be escalating situations. And that's also coming much stronger through the accountability framework in the organisation. Just also like to note the Commerce Commission disclosure, foundational information disclosure is out for consultation. You'll see a number of those items in there do specifically talk to a lot of the things in the improvement plan. Also, the improvement plan itself and delivery against that is one of those foundational information disclosures. So they are also taking a strong look and lens through the value for money and performance metrics as well. So we not only have you as our governors, we've also got the Commerce Commission. So we're making sure we're dealing and bringing that through. And that was my thoughts on where we are uplifting to. Any comments, thoughts?
Here's questions of Erin. Okay, I will kick. Kara's got one. Awesome.
Sorry. Kia ora, Erin. Thanks for this. I guess, when I sort of come into these sort of spaces, I like to sort of have some core fundamental beliefs as a governor around how I sort of might be able to provide my input. And I guess sort of for me in this space, it's sort of the outcomes for our community is really, really important. Transparency and accountability is fundamental to governance. And particularly within the functions and the operational activities of this organisation, it's planning for uncertainty as well, because of the nature of the business that you're working in. Some of the things that you've talked about, sort of like the culture shift, that learned helplessness, is really, really important. There's the whole value for money, which also ties into the commercial regulator and all those sorts of things. I don't really want to get into details, but I just want to get a sort of a gauge of just for my sense of confidence and ensuring accountability and transparency that I was just wondering if you could sort of share with us some examples of some of the things that you guys are doing to sort of lift up those things around culture, or what are those things that you guys are doing specifically around value for money as well, so that we're quite clear and grounded in the bounds that we're operating in within those areas, so that we're quite, like, for instance, value for money is it's a very difficult thing, and people will have different views on that. Culture shift, we've all been a part of, organizational surveys and all those sorts of things. But if you could just sort of sort of signal to us some of the things, some of the activities that you guys are sort of looking at, without going into too much detail, because it's not our job to get into the detail and the operations of the organization. But if you could just sort of signal to us some of those things that you guys are doing, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you for your question. So I spoke specifically around value for money. I think, I mentioned the fact that all contracts now have competitive tension. So we've broken apart the old panel arrangements, and so that there is no self-allocation within the panel. We talked previously that the panel would get a program of work and there'd be self-allocation of that work. That's no longer happening. We now have competitive tension all the way through those projects. And similar things also happening in the consultant area. We had a previous arrangement, and that was a resourcing, the nature of the business at the time, no longer acceptable, is where a lot of our project management was outsourced to our consultant panel. And so we've now split that out and remove that conflict, but also remove that sense of power that they had. So now all contractors, all project managers are under direct control of Wellington Water. And the big shift that lends to not only changing the culture, and that kind of leads to the accountability, that we're taking accountability for that delivery, is there's obviously a value for money lens in there too. So we're converting contractors into FTE, staff, and changing the way we do that. So, delivering outcomes, whether we deliver them for cheaper or whether we deliver more for the same value. So, so those are a couple of really tangible examples that we've driven in through there. And Pat?
Perhaps I could pitch in there a little bit. So I was talking with the staff this morning. I have a meeting once a fortnight with all the staff. We've just reintroduced that as part of trying to emphasise the changes we're trying to make. And another change, for example, is we've just changed our special conditions of contract. They were so risk averse, and that was with some involvement from Upper Hutt City Council in trying to understand why one of our prices was so high, and we were being far too conservative on an allocation of risk. So in the space of 2 weeks, we changed our special conditions of contract, rolled those back out to the market, and ran training sessions for our staff on how to understand them and use them. And that saw a tender for an Upper Hutt drop from $2.6 million to $1.8 million. We are now carrying some risk, and it's likely the end price will be somewhere around just under $2 million, but it's still a lot cheaper for Upper Hutt City Council, and we were grateful for them pointing it out. It's those sorts of things that we're finding. But in terms of value for money, it's being able to demonstrate some form of competitive tension. So that, yes, we had 4 prices, and we just weren't relying on one quote and an engineer's estimate. It's being able to show value for money. And sometimes that's what we're guilty of. It's not that we didn't achieve value for money, we just couldn't prove value for money. And the staff, it's one of the things I emphasised today. I don't know how many times this morning I said those words, value for money, when I was talking, but if they can't demonstrate that competitive tension, then don't start presenting a price proposal up the chain. And some staff are, I think, are grieving for what they left behind, but 95% understand this is what they are there for. The other things I talked about as priorities was delivering on that improvement plan. We must continue to demonstrate to the councils, the shareholding councils, that we're serious about these changes. And I think we've identified 93 of those 123 recommendations that our action plan will deliver over the next 12 months. And the culture, there's a feeling within the organisation that in the last 4 or 5 weeks we have turned a corner. That we're no longer reacting to crises. We're now identifying things we can improve and starting to get control of our own destiny, just a little. And I have to say that being able to send the email out to staff last week about third-tier staff and below transferring on existing terms and conditions was a huge morale boost to the organisation. I had talked that it was worrying people, but now I'm hearing that people can go home and tell their partner, I still have a job. I don't have to start looking for somewhere else to work, and that's huge. We have a lot of people in that 30 to 40 year age group with children and mortgages, and so that has provided a lot of assurance. IT funding is another big boost, that Greater Wellington, while they haven't quite formally approved it yet, I understand it's been through the committee stage, so we wait with bated breath, but that is another huge morale boost to this organisation, that finally there's an investment in the company and the people, and that is also a big boost to morale. And in terms of learned helplessness, the phrase we want to start using is listening in action. And I guess underneath that, where people feel safe to speak up and raise risk early. So that's what we're going to be driving through the organisation, is listening in action. Learned helplessness was our reaction, and now we're trying to take control of our own destiny. And we'll have more of these stories to be able to share each time as we come back. Thank you.
Any other questions on either for Pat or Erin?
I guess just my final question is that thanks for that, Erin and Pat, and it's great to just sort of get a bit of a scratch into the organisation and around where things are at, and see where things are. But I guess and I guess it's just it's totally up to you guys with respect of the approach that you take. But I guess there's just a question there on with respect to the improvement plan is we could sort of say that there's an argument that I could put that it says that it's activity heavy and outcome light. Where are the metrics? Where are those goalposts that we're setting on certain things? So, but it's always to operate these things operate on continuum, right? As we grow. So it's just a question for you guys to think about around how you might enhance this in your own teams, in your own organisation, around how you might want to come up with some specific measures or outcomes in that space. But that's totally in my mind, within your gift around how you want to operate these things. But from a governance level, sometimes it's quite good to see where those metrics are, and that we're quite clear in what those outcomes are and whether they're being achieved or not.
I think that's a really astute point, Cara, because we have had a number of previous reviews, and my criticism with them often was that they were action heavy and outcome light, and that whilst there was a perception that a lot of stuff was being done, actually not necessarily the right stuff was being done, or it wasn't cutting through in the right way. Nick wants to make a comment.
I'd just like to go back to those strategic outcomes, the ends that I talked about at the start. Those are the high level endpoints. Now, I realise that many we often don't actually deal with ends-based strategy, but the purpose of that is so you've got something, you're really clear about what the board and the organisation is driving towards at a high level, and it's our job to take Carter's point around, well, what are the metrics that tell you, the reportable metrics that tell you that, we've got there or we're getting close. But I do want to reassure you that we are thinking in outcomes. That's unlike, might I add, many, many, many organisations. So there is that laser focus.
I have a couple of specific questions delving into the detail, but does anyone have any other kind of higher level, higher order questions or comments before we get stuck in? No, I'm not seeing any hands up. Okay, from me, Erin, my main question was around asset management, which you mentioned in your cover paper, and also as an objective under communities receive reliable Three Waters services. So you've said asset management framework developed. So I'm wondering if you could explain exactly what we've done there, especially as we understood there were problems with, for example, our contractors holding quite a lot of our asset management information. Are we actually in a position where we can move away from that risk, or are we still there? And I mean, quite a lot of the the issues we have around asset management are to do with data and the understanding of our asset condition and even our asset location. So I'm not sure that we're in a position to actually improve any of that at the moment. So if you can let us know exactly what's going on. You also make a comment around Wellington Water cost allocation methodology agreed. Can you explain what that means, please?
To your first question, thank you. So the asset management framework, we've been quite deliberate in the work we've been doing around reorientating our how we think about and deliver asset management to the asset management standards. So the ISO 55000, which is a international standard. And what we've done is looked at the how we orientate our delivery to that. And you'll see some of that also in the new organizational structure, because that is very, orthodox in terms of asset management. What that then means is we can now start leaning in across the organization and working on those workflows from strategy to the planning to the capital delivery to operations, and actually making sure we're getting all those workflows and all those components working better. And that's our work over the next 12 months and that leads also to the capable organization. You talked about the contract.
It's still a little bit unclear in terms of what you're actually doing.
Okay.
And what we can do given the IT constraints and data constraints.
Yes, good point. So what we are doing is once
also
you have
waiting in the wings to say something. I don't know whether you want to hand over to him.
Okay. That's all right. Pat can go. Yep. He's been in the detail on this one.
Having set up an orthodox management structure, you now have these pyramids that you don't want to turn into silos. So from an asset management framework point of view, what I'm looking for is that there is a good flow of information from the operations teams, networks, treatment plants, and the maintenance teams through into the asset management systems and through to the strategy and planning group. Their job will be to make sure all that information is put in the right places, that it's understood, and the right places will still be our contractors' asset management systems for the next couple of years. And that from that we identify priorities for work, issues that need to be fixed, do a quick business case, probably a business case light, to establish what the options are and what the preferred option is. I identify a price, a cost, an estimate, and then work up a scope, and then issue that work to the capital delivery factory, which then churns out the delivery of them. At the moment, the work comes up, it goes to capital delivery, it's given to a consultant, and then they start working up the scope, because it hasn't really been developed up until now. So once the capital delivery team have finished it, there's a good handover back to the operations team, and there is a strong working relationship across the organisation, and I don't have everyone working in silos. So that's what I see by an asset management framework, is that, as Erin signalled, is that flow of information and strong working relationships across the organisation and not just up and down. And that's what we're trying to working very hard to bed in at the moment. But we haven't done it like this. Strategy and planning don't have the resources at the moment to do that work. And it's trying to get a structure there and get the people in place to do that. And it's been identified as one of the challenges for Metro Water is until Metro Water has those systems well in place and good people doing all of that work, capital budgets can't grow.
Okay, so I'm hearing that it's when you talked about asset management framework being developed, you're talking about a process flows across the organisation, and we're still relying on the systems of our contractors, and we haven't yet made any inroads into data quality. That's all contingent on kind of next steps in terms of IT.
Yes, I think at the moment we are actually out to the market. We've been encouraged to move quickly on this, and so it's no regrets work. But yes, and also as funding certainty increases, we can start doing more in that proactive maintenance space in terms of quality assessment, asset condition, that type of work. I mean, it was interesting when we visited Wellington City Council about 2 weeks ago. One of the questions that was asked was, "Do you have a good series of zone meters throughout your network to understand how the network's working?" And Charles said, "Well, we were starting to invest in that, but we had to start shifting all our money into reactive works. So we don't have a good network, and a lot of the meters we did have either failed to work or fallen out of calibration, and we haven't been able to fix them. But if we did have a good network of zone meters, we might have found what was happening in Mount Cook a lot quicker." So it's that sort of thing that we will start to address, but really it's the new company will have that funding certainty and able to start addressing a lot of the data quality issues. Some of that is outside our reach at the moment. All we can do is get the basis, but to be honest, it's probably a 3-year journey to get us from where we are to being a high-performing company ready to start ramping up its capital budgets.
Erin, do you just want to touch on what Wellington Water cost allocation methodology agreed means?
So that was if we look back to the cost estimation era, one of the issues was we didn't have the right allocations made in the capital program. So that has been resolved with the CFOs and our Chief Corporate Services Officer, and we have a process and a model for that. So, that is an assurance and a mitigation of that risk.
Hi. I also have a question around data analytics. So this didn't sort of feature in your appendix, but you've talked about it previously, and you've talked quite a lot about various metrics, but they're sort of metrics around contractors, for example, rather than data that councils might be able to delve into to see the state of their assets, to see what work is being done, the cost. So we've talked a lot about the need for councils to get a better understanding of the cost and progress of their work. And you had a data analytics piece of work that was looking to bridge that gap, but I didn't read about it here.
Thank you. I guess we've already seen an uplift in the actual information and data analytics provided to the committee, and they come through in the operational reports that you see on a quarterly basis. The Alliance performance report also has which you will see also has operation and maintenance cost built into it, and data analytics around the cost and planned and reactive maintenance. These are also things that we will be providing to the Commerce Commission in the foundational disclosure. There was a piece of work done around looking at a regional analytical framework around different metrics around the assets and cost. While we did develop that, and I think we talked about that at the committee in May, that while we did develop that framework, when you actually get down into the detail of how would we deliver it, it comes to the same fundamental issue we have around systems and data and getting good data into the system. And so what we are doing in that space is making sure that the technology systems that we're looking to invest in are building and have the ability to build those analytics and collect that data and provide those analytics through into the future. So while we might not be able to do the deeper dive, then at the moment there are some metrics that we do have and can be talking to councils about, and that will be something that if councils look to want to have those, then we can have that conversation.
Cool. I think that's something that councils have told us that that's really important not to lose sight of, and we're really looking for some simpler ways to understand the costs and what the services are. Hey, just my last point, under the protected disclosures stuff, last time I asked that could be explicitly expanded beyond staff, because there are other groups that may wish to make protected disclosures and they won't be able to input into the same way as staff. And could I see that
Noted.
reflected at the next?
Yes.
Cool. Okay,
Absolutely.
any other questions from anyone else? Last chance before we cool. Okay. I don't see any other hands or people desperate to speak or ask questions. So in that case, we just have to receive the progress report. So I will move that the committee receives the progress report on the implementation of the improvement plan. Rawari is going to second that, which is awesome. Is there any debate on that, or are we happy to put the motion? There being none, I will put the motion. Now that it's been moved and seconded, all those in favour?
Right.
Resounding carried. Okay, awesome. Does anyone have any other questions or comments before we say our closing karakia? No, once again, I'm not seeing anyone have any other urgent issues they wish to raise. So we do have our our next kind of primary Wellington Water meeting scheduled for the very end of July. So we will see you back there to discuss some other issues as well as the improvement plan. I'm not sure, are you bringing a report back to that meeting, or will that be the... Yes, cool. Okay. So yeah, next meeting's end of July. Look forward to seeing everyone there. I will close with our closing karakia. Una hia I te ura tapanui, kia wātia, kia mama, tinako, ti tinana, ti wairua I ara takatu. Koia rā I rongo whakahaerea, aki ki runga, kia wātia, ai rā kua wātia. Hau pai Mārie.